Welcome to Soul Care, which is a weekly message that I hope will bring just a bit of hope into your life. One of the things that we can do to care for our souls is to develop resilience. We all know of people who've been beaten down by life experiences, and we know people too who have been beaten down, but then who have risen up and gone on and continue to be strong and productive people. Of course, we'd like to be those that go on and live happy, productive lives. During this COVID period, we've had a lot of loss. We've experienced things that we cannot do. We can't move about freely. We can't associate or gather. We can't go to the homes of people we care about. We can't even be with our loved ones if they're in the hospital. We can't gather for memorial services or for weddings or for birthday celebrations, things that we are used to. We have a long list of what we cannot do. It's really a string of losses, and we must grieve losses. How do these losses affect us? Are we beaten down by them? Are we depressed? Do we turn to bad habits? Do we whine and complain, or do we turn to anger? Or are we able to go on and draw from some inner strength and become resilient in spite of it all? In sports, we talk about making a comeback. After an illness, we might say that someone bounced back. But both of these terms, to make a comeback or to bounce back, imply that we return to a normal. But really, these losses change us such that we never go back. We are never the same again. What is required of us is more than a comeback, more than a bouncing back. We need to move forward as changed people. Our world has changed, and so have we. I like to use the phrase overcome. We live through our tragedies and hope that we come over or overcome the suffering. As we come over or come through, we find ourselves changed for the future and able to go on, but differently. That's resilience. My son Eric was in high school. It was his junior year in the spring, and he was taking a class to become a lifeguard that summer for a summer job. And for some reason, he was out of sync with the city program, probably due to his tennis schedule. So he went out of town to take the final lifeguard test. He had a rotator cuff injury from tennis playing, but he wanted to take the test anyway to prepare for the summer. So he took the test, and part of the test is treading water with a brick. I'm not just sure how they do that, but he did not pass. Something about that was too hard. The treading water was too long, or the pain was too great in his shoulder, and he didn't make it. And at the end of the test, he asked if he could take it again. And they told him yes, he could. Come tomorrow. And so he went the next day. He drove himself out of town, and he took that test again. And by golly, he passed. I might not have known much about this, except that when Eric wrote his college admission essay, he used this experience of treading water a second time in his essay. And then, of course, there were the months of waiting for colleges to respond. And when he got the acceptance letter from UC Berkeley, we all laughed and said, it must have been the essay. It must have been the treading water a second time. that convinced the admissions officer that he could do it? Well, we chose to have Eric's essay read at his memorial service after he died suddenly by suicide at the age of 26. The essay described Eric's determination to make the most of his life in spite of setbacks. We didn't know until shortly before he died that he had a serious mental illness. As we listened to Eric's essay being read by the minister at the memorial service, little did I know that I would ever overcome the tragedy of his death. But we are more resilient than we ever know. Now, after I've had a career change, or better said, a new calling or a new vocation, I know many people who have had to change their path, who have had to overcome some difficult tragedy in their lives and have gone on with resilience. One colleague that I know is a minister by the name of Mantu Yoshi. Now, Mantu was a parent, is still a parent of special needs children, and at one point he was the stay-at-home dad with 2 special needs children. And there were times when he was exasperated and coping was very difficult. And out of reaching out and learning, he developed suggestions for other parents with special needs children. And he wrote a book called The Resilient Parent. Mantu doesn't like to use the term bounce back because there is simply no going back when you have a child who has autism or ADHD or developmental learning issues. You are forever changed as you move forward. Mantu Yoshi uses the image of a penguin to describe what is needed in adjusting to a major life change. When there is loss of expectation and when there is a loss of freedom for the parent in the case of having children with disabilities. He says, penguins are birds who have learned to adapt to the coldest place on the planet, and they have learned to fly underwater. And for those of us who parent, we can still fly, but it's going to look completely different. We have to adapt, and we have to fly in a place that we even maybe have never even considered before. And when we think of resilience in this way, that we are becoming, that we can grow despite this exposure to all these stressors, then it becomes this whole new way of being, he says. And if we can get into that kind of more positive space, then it doesn't feel like our life is being destroyed by our family and all the negative dynamics. We begin to kind of go, oh, these are things that are helping me to kind of fly underwater. So how can we be like birds that can no longer fly in the air the way we used to fly? Can we learn to adapt? Can we still fly, but in new ways? I wonder how you have adapted during this COVID time. I wonder what new skills you've developed, what new things you're trying out. Maybe you see this time as a challenge, but one you can overcome. In the end, we will overcome this challenge. I know we will. We will ride over it and land on the other side, and we will be changed. We will have developed resilience, for one thing. We will not take things for granted. We will accept that loss is a part of life, but that it doesn't have to define us. That's what resurrection, after all, is about. After 3 days, we overcome death. We overcome sadness, and we realize we have a job to do. The song by Natalie Sleeth says, "In the bulb, there is a flower. In the seed, an apple tree. In cocoons, a hidden promise. Butterflies will soon be free. In the cold and snow of winter, there's a spring that waits to be unrevealed until its season, something God alone can see." So rely on God and on the promise that we can overcome our challenges. We don't do it alone. We do it, thank God, with one another. Take care of your soul.